itself. And so I've got a pretty standard demo that I like to do. Again, I'm a history teacher by training, so I tend to pick things that I have some information about. This is ChatGPT 4. This is the paid version of ChatGPT. I do not want to tell you how many tools I'm paying for out of pocket right now from these companies, but let me assure you it's many more than I should. But the advanced version, it's $20 a month. It is noticeably better than the free version. And this is what I tend to use in my tool set. So it looks like a Google search, right? It's got a simple box that asks you to message ChatGPT. And so I'm giving you a quick demo. I'm going to ask this to create a document that is the causes of World War I, right? I know enough about this. I probably taught it 24 times in my time in a history classroom. And so when it comes up with things like alliance systems, imperialism, nationalism, if you scroll down, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, that's the causes of World War I. You can get that on a Google search, right? In fact, there's probably 200 pages that tell you exactly this information in some way, shape, or form. But this is different for a couple of reasons. First, it's not cited, right? You have no idea where this information came from. Some of the models now do Google searches, and I'll show you that in a couple of moments, but not the way you Google search, but in the way a machine might Google search. Second is that if you go back to this tomorrow, it's not going to give you the same answer. It might give you something that's fundamentally the same answer. In other words, it's going to talk about nationalism, imperialism, and the Archduke assassination, but it may use different words. It may be longer. It may be shorter, right? If you change one or two words of the prompt, it might give you something completely different because this is not a Google search. It is instead a large language model. Other evidence that this is the case, I'm going to ask it to turn it into an outline, and it does that very easily for me. And by the way, Google will not do that for you. Second, I'm now going to ask it to rewrite this in Swedish on the odd chance I need a Swede to learn about the causes of World War I. But I'm also not stuck in reality at all. And the example I give of that is now translate this into Pig Latin, which is not a real language. You could had a college roommate, you'd have to talk him out of that, but it does that very easily for me and translate that to Pig Latin. And by the way, I also don't need even realistic but unrealistic requests. And the example I have of that is I now would like you to convert this to Morse code on the odd chance you have access to a large language model, but no phones for some reason. And so here you go. By the way, ChatGPT fought me a little bit on this one, right? And it said, well, that's going to take an awful lot of computing power. It's quite extensive. So it only did the causes, right? But I would take this a step further to say that another model, this is called Claude, which is a different large language model, did this for me, but you'll notice that it hiccups in the middle and then moves back to Pig Latin. So I'm not entirely sure why it does that. I did apparently break Claude, at least for a couple of moments, but again, you get the basic idea. Now, here's where it gets interesting to me, because obviously not everyone can read at the same level, not everyone has the same background. So when I asked ChatGPT to rewrite that history of the causes of World War I, now at a 7th grade reading level with vocabulary that's aimed at the 7th grade reader, it's now doing that for me, and it tones down the vocabulary ever so slightly to the 7th grade reader. Now, is it actually like measuring it using some sort of acknowledged standard like a Lexile score? It's not, in part because Lexile would sue them if they did that. But more importantly, it's because it's read so many middle school, junior high school world history textbooks that it has a vague notion of what a 7th, 8th, 6th, 5th, 4th grader, 1st grader might read in regards to that style of writing. And by the way, I can also ask it to create then a glossary of terms for me out of that same reading that's challenging to a low-level reader. Okay. And then I'm also not based on things that are useful. I can also ask it to create a history of the causes of World War I using exceptionally smug and high-level vocabulary. And it does that very well for me. The causative tapestry of the Great War, known as World War I, is an intricate mosaic of geopolitical maneuverings. And if I wanted to speak that way to my students or write in that way to my students, I could easily do that as well. And then to maybe take it a step further, and this is not Google, I ask it this time now to create a document about the causes of World War I, but I'm now going to ask it for the viewpoint of the Russian Empire at the time and not the United States or even Western European history. And it focuses on things that typically aren't taught in a standard US history course, and instead focuses on some minor events, at least from the standpoint of an American history student, that also contributed to Russia's play in the war. And that's interesting to me because that is not a Google search. You may be able to go on the 20th or 30th or 40th page of a regular World War I search, or even go specifically from Russia's point of view. But the fact that it's able to switch that around and look at it from a different perspective, I think is an important difference between these sets of technologies and Google. Okay, now going back to the notion of, if it's read a little bit about something, it knows a little bit. If it's read a lot about something, it knows a lot. The way you can tell that is by starting to ask these large language models to do something that's not nearly as well known. And the best way I know how to do that is to ask it about myself. So if I ask ChatGPT to write a biography of Jason Neiffer, an educator in Montana, it politely but firmly tells me that I'm not important enough to be in the large language model. So I'm sorry, I won't be able to provide this in detail. For privacy reasons, it's also crucial to ensure that any information shared about a private individual with their consent and respects their privacy, blah, 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 blah. Well, luckily, not everyone shares that notion, because when I ask Claude to do the same thing, it also says, you know what, I don't really know who you are, but I'm going to spit shot it anyways. Jason Neiffer is a American computer scientist, false, known for his work in artificial intelligence, false, born in 1975, false, in California, false. Neiffer showed an early interest in technology and programming. Yes, it figured out I was a nerd. He studied computer science at MIT, false, although I did go to Carroll College, the MIT of Helena. So I guess it's close, right? Graduating in 1997, true. After college, Neiffer worked at several tech companies. False, 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 false. Skipping to the end, he lives in San Francisco, false, with his wife, true, his 2 children, false. So note how it says, maybe this is right? Or I'll guess based on someone named Jason Neiffer might look like, but in this particular case, it just totally made it up. And notice there's not the least bit amount of doubt about whether or not this is correct. Now, modern tools are a little different. They are now starting to integrate searches into it. And so when I asked a recent model to create a biography of me, it writes a biography of me. Now, admittedly, this sounds like my mom wrote it. It's very, very, very complimentary to me. I'm a prominent figure in the field of educational technology and online learning, but this is now citing sources. And what's interesting about this is that if you start digging down, most of these sources were written by me. So in this particular case, it's not because a third party vetted this. It's biographies I've put up on things I've written, or biographies I've put up on organizations that I belong to. It's different, but note how you have to dig a little bit to find out where this came from. And again, it sounds like my mom wrote it because I was trying to make myself sound, pretty darn important, okay? Now, it's important that if it's not already part of your vocabulary to ignore ChatGPT as a generic noun, I think you need to start doing that right now. Stop referring to everything as ChatGPT. And one of the reasons why is because there's literally hundreds of models at play right now. Most major countries have a large language model at play. The United States military is rumored to be working on a number of models themselves, not to mention the European Union, several regional consortiums in Africa. Everyone is in this space right now. But it's also important to note that while we tend to focus on the words that are spit out by ChatGPT, it can do an awful lot of interesting things beyond writing. Yes, it can generate words. Yes, it can generate pictures. It can also generate music. There's a plugin for Microsoft Copilot right now called Sumo that literally allows you to say, please write me a song about this. And it writes the music and the lyrics and a minute of that particular thing. I've used it to troll all my coworkers over the last couple of weeks. You can also generate video, of which in the last 6 weeks has gone from kind of an interesting thought experiment. There are now tools you can train for less than 5 minutes, and it will recreate whatever you want in regards to the text that someone is saying. And then, of course, it's not just creating, it can analyze at a very, very high level. Everything from text analysis to image recognition to interpreting and parsing through data. Now, Midjourney is a good example of this. I like to do this in part because I think it's important to understand people are trying to do good things with Midjourney and sometimes bad things, but I think it's important to understand the barriers that exist with these technologies. So again, I am a history teacher by training, and so I tend to go to examples that are more historical, but showing you what Midjourney does, I think is really important. I stole this prompt from the internet. Barbie and Oppenheimer, you may remember the cultural phenomenon known as Barbieheimer that saved Hollywood last summer. Well, Barbie and Oppenheimer are in a desert witnessing a nuclear explosion. There's a pink mushroom cloud on the horizon, and it's cinematic. And then for some people in the room, it's in the style of Wes Anderson. And if you know who Wes Anderson is, you'll recognize this. If you don't, I couldn't possibly explain what Wes Anderson is. But the image it creates is a pretty legitimate Barbieheimer Wes Anderson image, right? Colors set is there. The pink mushroom cloud is there. There you go. Now, making something slightly less ridiculous, I like to make pictures of Teddy Roosevelt. Again, former history teacher. But the reason why I think Teddy Roosevelt's a really good example of this is because when I said the words Teddy Roosevelt, a picture popped into your mind, right? Big gruff guy, rough rider, big bushy mustache, right? That's Teddy Roosevelt. And there's no shortage of images on the internet, even legitimately licensed ones you don't have to have permission for, of Teddy Roosevelt. Not to mention an unbelievable number of images generated by an artist over the last 100 years. But if I go and ask the large language model to create me one, it does that very easily. These are four pretty legit looking images of Teddy Roosevelt. The only one that is a little sketchy to me is the one on, or the ones on the left, right? Because it's a little off face-wise, but otherwise, these would all pass as Teddy Roosevelt. This is, well, I mean, you're not stuck to reality, right? Teddy Roosevelt was a president of the United States, ran for office again after he was out of office in the so-called Bull Moose Party. But here we go. If I want Teddy Roosevelt to be not in his age, I can do that. So in this case, I want him to show an image of him with an iPhone in the style of a modern day influencer, you're obviously Instagramming. And here we go. This is Teddy Roosevelt with an iPhone in his hand. This image itself is about 6 months old. I used a more recent version of this, and it's a little more nuanced, right? In part because I like the one on the upper right-hand side, Teddy Roosevelt, his picture being taken by someone who's obviously going to immediately post that to Instagram, but obviously that's not from the modern day era, that's from 100 years ago. But again, I'm not stuck in reality. If I want Teddy Roosevelt to become the fifth Beatle, there we go. Although clearly, the one on the lower left-hand side is Nick Offerman, but still. What if I want Teddy Roosevelt to be in a fist fight with Vladimir Putin? Well, that's fine. This is interesting because suddenly a bear pops up out of nowhere. And, you know, it's not a far-fetched to have a bear pop up. Teddy Roosevelt, the namesake of the teddy bear, but also Russia, historically associated with bear iconery. And there it is. I don't really know what it is, except I have one more piece of evidence. If I ask Jimmy Fallon to interview Teddy Roosevelt on The Tonight Show, that bear comes back again. And I did not mention Teddy Roosevelt anywhere in that prompt. And again, clearly, on the lower left-hand side, that's Nick Offerman. So if I continue the ridiculous tour here, Teddy Roosevelt and Vladimir Putin are in a limbo contest. No limbo poll, but the bear comes back again. At least we have someone that looks like Vladimir Putin this time around. And again, you're not really stuck to reality, but also it has to know what things look like. So our earlier thing, the least it's read or knows about you, the more likely you are to get weird answers. The more it knows about something, the more it's processed about something, the more likely to get better answers. Here's a good example. If I ask it to come up with an image of me speaking to a group of space aliens, it nails the aliens. It's 100 pounds and a beard off for me. So again, nails the nerdy part of it, but still not an image of me at all. And again, there are images of me on the internet. It's certainly trained on some, but not nearly enough in comparison to like a Teddy Roosevelt, okay? So again, ridiculousness, I can create Harry Truman Lego Man. I can create Speaker of the House of Representatives paper dolls. I can create evil leaders of history trading cards. Note the ones in the upper left-hand corner are clearly space alien evil leaders of history. So maybe that's a premonition of what's to come. And then I stay away from current politics for a very, very, very good reason. The most recent I'm able to go, in my view, is the Bill Clinton administration. So I'm going to have Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich singing a duet together on American Idol. And here they are, probably singing Islands in a Stream. So that is a sense of that. And this picture is a good example because this is photographic in nature, right? This isn't something that is clearly generated because it has more of an art feel. This looks kind of like a photograph. And this one happens to be 6 months old. I would imagine the newer models can do a lot different types of things. Okay. Speaking of new models, I want to give you a sense on how fast this is moving. This is an article from April 2023 that tested Mid-Journey, which has been around for a couple of years now. On the left-hand side was an April 2022 image. On the right-hand side, 1 year later, was April 2023. The particular prompt was about Trump and Obama playing one basketball. One on the left kind of looks like a 1970s progressive rock album cover. The one on the right looks like a photograph of what you might imagine might be Trump v. Obama one-on-one basketball. This image too, April 2022, same prompt versus April 2023. And to give you a sense of this, it's also in the individual tools as well. In late 2022, I downloaded one of those apps where you can upload 15 of your photos and will create AI headshots for you. My wife thinks these look nothing like me, especially the two that happen to involve my dog. But you can see here, AI Kenny Rogers Jason, AI astronaut Jason. I like the one in the upper right-hand side because clearly I'm Father Time in that photo. But even a year later, there was a phenomenon in social media in late 2023 called AI Yearbook, where celebrities were uploading 15 of their images and recreating AI images of themselves, supposedly from high school. I did the same. And that's not that far off, as it turns. And proof of that, here's my senior picture. By the way, my wife loves and hates this photo. She always asks me, were you trying out for The Apprentice or something? But you get the idea here, right? It's not that far off from where I was. And this is 1 year difference in the technology from kind of artsy headshots to something that's clearly much more advanced. And the takeaway from this is this is happening at a rate that we've never seen before in any technological evolution. The internet itself took almost decades to create something that was really disruptive to a lot of technologies, certainly, industry, certainly education, but that's something to keep in mind as well.